When the pandemic hit, I think it's fair to say that most organizations had a predominantly on-site workplace model and then pivoted almost overnight to a completely remote workplace model. Post-pandemic, many organizations have settled on something sort of in the middle with a 2-3 day split or something along them lines. But what's the real impact of this? One thing is for sure, it certainly seems like something has changed forever. Things like collaborative and leisure-based workplaces seem to be becoming more prevalent and behaviors have shifted. For instance, companies have factored hybrid working into their talent acquisition and talent screening processes. It really feels like a physical shift is causing a cultural shift. I really wanted to open a discourse on this subject, and following an impromptu introduction through an ex-guest, I think I found the perfect person to get on. Lucy Minton is the founder and COO of workspace design startup Kitt. Following a bad experience trying to find an office space, her and her co-founder decided to set up Kitt in 2018. Lucy actually talks candidly about the early part of her career and the journey towards setting up Kitt. But we also do a deep dive on what a workplace really is and what it needs to provide its employees. Lucy seems to advocate viewing your workplace as an asset, not as an overhead, which I think is the future and is going to shape the thinking around this space in the coming years. I really love doing this one. It is such a fascinating subject, and Lucy is great. So yeah, I'm sure the energy in our conversation will come across. It's Lucy Minton. Lucy, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. I've been really excited to talk to you. So let's kick off with the bombshell question I always ask in the first couple of minutes of each Tech Leaders podcast. What does good leadership mean to you, Lucy?
Yeah, really good question. So for me, good leadership, I would say, is knowing how to bring together a diverse group of people and creating an environment where they can work together to create amazing outcomes. That could be amazing outcomes for a business. It could be amazing outcomes for, a project in a university. But for me, it's all about bringing people together and giving them the environment to thrive.
Wow, that's a brilliant answer. Yeah, I've never heard it put quite like that, but creating an environment where you would achieve outcomes, I suppose that encapsulates what leadership is all about, isn't it? So how would you describe the environment that you and your co-founders have created at Kitt?
Yeah, it's a good question that we get asked a lot when people are interviewing, actually. I think for us, I can certainly talk to what we're trying to create, which is, both me and Steve, my co-founder, came from a startup beforehand. So it was an entrepreneurial environment. And I think for us, that business grew from really, I was just kind of like the first employee really after the leaders of the business. And it grew to about 70 or 80 people by the time we left to start Kitt. And I think we personally benefited so much from being in an environment where if you are of the right attitude and it's the place that you want to be, there is so much to gain from it, both personally and professionally, in terms of how you can grow. And what I mean by that is the opportunities are endless if you go about your day putting the business first and with a really open-minded attitude of who knows what today will bring, but as long as I'm open-minded about what the answer could be, then the opportunity to grow is really, really big. And I think, we both found that we grew with the business really well.
Yeah.
And I would say that's professionally, we were able to progress and learn in different environments, but also personally, we were both in our 20s. It's a very crucial time for your personal career development. And I think certainly for me, the confidence that it gave me being in an environment like that was just brilliant.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting perspective that, I think a lot of the time for a startup and a scale up, you want the velocity of the growth of the business to match the career aspirations of your employees.
Exactly.
Because if they don't align, then that knocks the harmony out a little bit, doesn't it?
It does. And I think, unfortunately, the tough side to that is it's not for everyone. I think it can lead to such positive things if you are able to bring the right people into the business and able to bring in people that want to be in that environment, that I think for me, the positives are just there, both from a business perspective and an individual perspective. But it does mean that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions if the environment's not right.
Yeah, no, completely understand. Let's wind back the clock a little bit then, Lucy. Okay, I'm keen to, find out a little bit about what makes you tick and about your career. So if you just give us maybe an overview of your career then and how you got to where you are today.
I mean, my education was a little bit boring. I was really good in school, which I know is like the least interesting part. You'd rather someone be like, I was terrible in school and I hated it, and then I left it and found my way. So no, I was actually quite good in school. I think, to be honest, I spent my years at school kind of going under the radar a little bit, just cracking on, getting on with it. I had lots of jobs outside school, and I kind of wasn't really much trouble growing up at all, as my family always says. I think, yeah, for me, it created a backdrop of just cracking on and not really asking for much from anyone, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it creates a really good work ethic where you just really are motivated to get the job done. But I think the bad side of that is you can be overlooked and you can be, afraid to speak up because in a classroom, and I went to a grammar school, so there was lots of very bright people there. And I think it kind of is a little bit the one who shouts the loudest gets noticed. I don't think that actually prepared me very well for the world of work, but I really think for me it was the working world and the working environment that helped me develop and really turn me into who I am today. And I actually think I sailed through the education system, but I don't think it was very good at setting me up for real life.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're obviously very good at order and compliance and rules, and then you were thrust. What I was quite surprising though, Lucy, is that you thrust yourself into a career path, which is kind of the antithesis of that almost, where rules and things don't really work because it's essentially
Yeah.
hardcore capitalism. You went into commercial based roles where you were essentially market facing. So talk us through that baptism of fire then, and why you went into sort of more commercial facing roles.
Yeah, well, I think my family background is pretty entrepreneurial in the sense that, I'm from a Jewish family. Both my grandparents had their own businesses in various forms of selling clothes and selling and property, and it's very much in the Jewish heritage to be entrepreneurial, and it kind of always has been. So I think that was always on my radar. I think, as I said, because I didn't really struggle at school, I think it was kind of you just went down the route of what was required of you. And because I didn't struggle, I didn't really feel the need to sort of buck the trend in any way. But I think by the end of however many years at school, 16 years at school, and then 3 years at university, I was pretty bored of people telling me what to do and people telling me what needed to be done for the next stage. And I think
Sure.
coming out of university, I think what I'd learned about myself is I really liked solving problems. So part of the reason I chose a STEM subject, so I studied mathematics, was because you didn't really need to know much. You could kind of figure out the answers. It's not like an essay subject where you have to kind of know all the theory and then write
Sure.
write it down.
Yeah.
It was like if you understand the concepts, then you can kind of go into the exam and in theory,
Flag
complete
it.
the exam. Flag it, you might say. And I think that's what I knew I liked doing. And with the backdrop of I'd seen what being entrepreneurial could provide in terms of some of my family members, it was quite clear to me that I wanted to go down a less predictable route that was more high risk, high reward, that would allow for me to have freedom both professionally and financially, eventually, all being well. I think for me that was the most important thing, was creative freedom, I suppose, day to day, and then with a view that financial freedom would follow if everything goes well.
So your first gig was with a company called Kamarama, is that right?
That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. So the first gig was actually in marketing. It was like a super creative environment. I think that was probably my rebellion against the system in a way, and that, you know, the education system is as you said, like full of order and full of people telling you what to do. And I think I knew I really didn't want to do that anymore. I knew I really liked solving problems and I wanted to explore like more creative side of problem solving, which drew me to marketing. It was like, I think with lots of graduate jobs, there's things that you learn in them that just give you a sort of stepping stone into the world, but it's not necessarily what you want to do forever. And I think what I realized pretty quickly being there was that the marketing side of things is not very deep in terms of influencing business, and you're working on briefs that you probably fundamentally disagree with the whole product, but you don't really have a say in that because you get it right at the end once it's already been developed. And I
Sure.
think I knew that really the North Star for me was setting up a business, and it was, do I do this now or do I do something like a startup to kind of get me ready for it? And also I was quite keen to start something with somebody else, and there was an opportunity to meet like-minded people if I jumped into the startup route. And yeah, I mean, I was like 24 or something at the time, so I felt like there was a lot I still needed to learn, which probably is a running theme around confidence for me. I'd say in my early 20s, I didn't really have the confidence to say, yeah, I can do this by myself. I'm going to
Mm.
bloody do it. So went into what was then called Park at My House, which we kind of rebranded and pivoted the business into more of a commercial organization called Just Park. In all truth, it was a pretty high risk move in lots of ways, and that it was very early stage, didn't have much funding. But from my perspective, the risk of sticking in something that wasn't progressing towards my goal was far bigger, and I was
Mm.
young enough not to have anything really relying on it.
You joined as obviously a very early employee, I'm assuming then, yes, as opposed to you were a part of the founding team.
No, early employee. So it was just the founder, and then he had a CEO that he was working with, and then I was
Sure.
kind of the first person after them. Yeah, completely nuts, wild ride of utter chaos, frankly. Spending the first few months thinking I was going to get fired. I think what you don't get in a startup, which I'm sure lots of people in this company would also say, is you just don't get that like safety net of process that exists in bigger companies where
Sure.
people make sure they tell you you're doing a really good job all the time, and you know exactly what meetings you have, and you know exactly when you're going to get a review for XYZ. And in the early stage, it's like you're out there, you've got to figure it out, and you're kind of
Yep.
fighting for
Absolutely.
yourself, which is just an unbelievable experience in developing your ability to add value.
Yeah, and think on your feet and just basically be. I think it gives you thick skin and makes you more resilient as well, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah, massive thick skin and resilient, and also just like really helps you prioritize what's important, because
Yeah.
ultimately you're there for the business, and if you don't work out how to grow the business, you won't have a job anymore. It's not like you're in a corporate where the business has been around for 50 plus years and people have progressed through the business and there's a really obvious path. It's like, right, all of that stripped away, you're here with these two guys and you just got to figure out how to grow the business. It's like
Sure.
it's pretty bare bones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not for the faint-hearted, I think they say, Lucy, don't they? For sure.
Yeah,
But
I think that's probably true.
you clearly have an enormous amount of drive
Mm.
and an enormous amount of determination to succeed. That comes across when you're talking in abundance. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of your friends that you went to school with and stuff didn't probably just went and become employees somewhere and stuff like that, but you've had this burning desire to want more. Where does that come from? I'm really keen to understand what it is that makes Lucy tick.
Yeah, so I think there's probably two things there. One I'd say is more external and one's probably more like internal. I think the first point is, I suppose it's around like your ability to leave an impact. I genuinely think that business is one of the best, if not the best ways of actually leaving an impact and influencing the world in some way. If you create a sustainable business that leads to better outcomes for people, that is an unbelievable way of influencing the world.
Absolutely.
And I think there's that drive of, wanting to look back and just look back and think, actually, I did make a difference to people in some way, people, businesses, people in those
Yes.
businesses. And it's tangible. And I can see that my contribution really made a difference to what they are trying to achieve. And I do think in business, that opportunity is infinite. Within one business or within multiple businesses, the impact you can make on people is really, really big. And
Sure.
because it's self-fulfilling and you make profit that drives more growth and all the rest of it, I genuinely think if you go about your business in the right way, it can be an amazing vehicle to create impact in the world. So that's probably the first reason. I think the second reason is probably a little bit more selfish, which is just around freedom, both in what I do every day. And obviously, I don't have complete freedom. We've got a board and I've got there's a team, and it's not like
Sure.
I can just come in and do what I want. But
No, of course, I know what you mean.
it's you're almost crafting your own future and your own
Yes.
day to day and what that looks like, with hopefully ideally a view of financial freedom at some point at the end of it. And I
Yeah,
think
sure.
the ability to control your own future.
Creative autonomy, I think, is a really
Yeah,
good way you could describe it. You can basically execute your ideas, can't you? Because you've got the tools and the trust to do that.
I think that's it. And it's your ideas have the opportunity to be realized and seen, and it's not from an ego perspective, because it's not like I'm not one of those people who come in and have these huge ideas that they make everyone do even though they're not commercially viable, but it is like, it's control over what it is you're building and how it is you're building it. And I think,
Sure.
yeah, ultimately with an end game that should give you some more personal control as well. It just, all of that to me is so appealing
Yeah.
in terms of how I want to live my day-to-day life and how I want to build my future. And I don't think you get that in any other environment, really.
No, that's very well said. No, I completely understand. So I want to get back on the sort of chronological theme then, because we went all the way up to, obviously you joined Just Park. It was a tough ride, but obviously you made it all the way to commercial director. So talk us through the second half of the period you were with Just Park, and the exit, and then maybe the formation of Kitt and how that came about.
About a year after I joined, Steve joined the business as well. So that's where we met. Steve's my co-founder at Kitt. And I think, we were kind of in discussion about wanting to set something up ourselves for a while. It was why we were both there. So that was always on the cards. But I think we were always wanting to stay with Just Park to kind of see it through to a point where we felt like we'd done what we needed to do. And also from a personal perspective, if there was still opportunity to learn and grow, then we were pretty keen on seeing that through as well. And I think the journey we had was initially really, really small, figuring out what it is we were doing and working out how to scale the business. Then there was a bit of a pivot in the business, where things changed quite drastically. After that point, Steve and I became part of the management team there, and there was this whole new set of challenges of, okay, so we've gone from like being really on the ground, figuring out like product market fit and sales strategy and all that kind of stuff. And then actually, okay, we're taking a bit of a step up here. We're running teams, we're building targets and goals for the future, and steering the ship essentially. And I think that, yeah, that brought a whole new set of challenges that we were really keen to lean into. It then got to the point where, yeah, we felt it was the right time for us to go, and we had the itch, and we had we had to jump into it. And I think Kit was really formed because of some experiences we'd had at Just Park. We were at the hub of trying to grow this business, trying to build a culture, trying to build a team, particularly with some changes throughout, reinvigorating a team against a new direction is a huge challenge. And I
Yeah.
think for us, the physical interactions that our teams had around collaborating on work, socializing, being together, connecting over something bigger than the 9 to 5 that they were doing was made so much more accessible by bringing people together in a space.
Yeah,
And the
sure.
office became such a hub of all of those things, and a feeling which is quite hard to articulate around, okay, we're all coming together to build something here, and we're really motivated to do that. And the relationship between the company and the team was not this transactional clock in clock out that you sometimes get in bigger companies.
Yeah,
It
of
was
course.
just, it was something more than that.
Yeah, there was a sense
And
of
I think
belonging then. Yeah, there was
it's a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. And I think for us, the office was a really big part of that. But the experience of buying the office or leasing the office was horrendous. And like, frankly, nothing that we bought as a business. It was just the most broken, backwards
Yeah,
transaction.
yeah.
So we just kind of felt that it would be a really interesting area to try and solve. And it's the sort of thing that affects almost every business. And so that was how we started talking about this industry and this product.
And the rest is history, eh?
And the rest is history, exactly.
So it started as a conversation, potentially in an empty new office you were going into or whatever. And then, but how did that escalate into August 2018, setting up the new company? What was that first initial period like? How did you get it going? Did you put your own money in, or did you immediately get seed investment, or what?
Yeah, bit of both. So a bit of own money, bit of seed investment, family, friends kind of thing. So pretty low key at that point. And originally the idea was actually completely different. So the original idea was a kind of tech platform app for office managers who are running spaces. So us providing the technology to help them run their office, which ends up being a part of our product now. But I think for us, we realized, I mean, Steve, I think almost had a nervous breakdown within the first month because we realized that idea was basically rubbish and we needed to change it, which I think is not uncommon, but I think, we're pretty open-minded to that. It's not like we had this like light bulb idea and that was the thing that we had to see through. We wanted to
Sure.
solve a problem and we wanted to find the right way to do that. So we were pretty open-minded to changing it. And we quite quickly realized that selling into office managers when they've already got a space, you're not really solving much of a problem there. The problem really is in the transaction and finding, designing, and then setting up and managing offices. And we realized that actually that end-to-end problem needs to be solved, and it's actually a much bigger, more ambitious problem to try and solve
Yes,
than
it is. Yeah.
just the slice on the end. But we kind of knew that was the only way, and with everything going on in the industry at the time, which was pre-COVID, and it's mad to think so much has happened since, but there had been some movements towards this better end-to-end journey for customers through the likes of WeWork and people like that coming in with these new products, which was interesting, but we felt solved the problem for a specific end of the market. So we felt it was a really good product for really small companies, but there wasn't really any product and frankly business model. I mean, everyone knows the business model of WeWork and the like are slightly compromised.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really a product or a business model that solved the end-to-end journey for larger companies, SMEs and above. And that really has been, I'd say, from Jan 19, that was where the clarity really came, and we started really operating on that model after some various tests and bits and bobs that happened before that. That was like, okay, we know what we need. We know what the product is. We know how we sell it. And this is all about scale up now. Well, not scale up, but get some customers.
Yeah, sure. What I think is probably a good idea now is to pivot over to February 2020, because obviously you had a business plan, you set out to achieve something, you saw an opportunity in the market, you were trying to solve a problem, but obviously all that gets blown apart, maybe for the better, by COVID. What were you thinking around that time? And when did the penny drop in terms of the opportunity for Kitt there? Because the timing was kind of perfect for you guys, I suppose, wasn't it, to really capitalize on that?
Yeah, I mean, the timing was perfect if you look back now, but I can tell you it didn't feel like that in, Feb 2020.
I can imagine.
But I mean, Feb 2020, March 2020, everyone was running around like headless chickens. No one knew what was going on. So I think at that point it was just like, are we going to go back to normal in 3 weeks? It wasn't really until maybe May, June where we were like, okay, no, this is here for a bit. You also had a bunch of press articles saying the office was dead and how remote working, everyone was loving it,
I
and being
remember
at
it,
home and all of that, which I don't think we ever questioned anything ultimately, but it's tough, right? You're being told that your customers can't use their offices, which they're paying you for, and obviously we had some churn inevitably during that time. We lost some customers, as you would. It was a tough time for the industry, but then there was also this existential narrative that was kind of basically saying your business was crap and people don't need it anymore. And however much we knew that wasn't true, it's just not that fun when you're sitting at home, you can't operate your business, and you've got lots of press articles saying that the product isn't needed.
Where were you at in your investment runway at that point, Lucy? Were you sort of Series A or something? Or?
No. We were still seed really at that point.
Seed, yeah. Okay.
And we did actually end up raising money in COVID a little bit later on. But I think what we found during that process is that there were people that saw through the noise and there were lots of people that didn't. So,
yeah, of course.
I mean, the VC community now is in a totally different place than it was then. But it's very, very hard to talk to VCs about stuff that's unpopular in the press. They're just not interested, even if there is a much bigger long-term story. And you do get a couple of more kind of forward-thinking people, but the investment community is very trend-driven, and no one wants to be the one who makes the big mistake. You also had all the stuff coming out about WeWork and the documentary, the We Crash.
Yeah, sure.
None of this was helpful.
No, I bet.
But we did find some investors, including Hoxton, who were kind of, I guess, cut through that all really and saw the longer term potential for a new way of doing things, and saw really actually COVID as the why now for our business.
So you had to put the private jet on hold for a little bit then, and
private jet's still on hold. Yeah.
So there was a lot of negative sentiment in the press and stuff like that. So I mean, but obviously you got through it and you're thriving now. But so looking back now, obviously you're pushing more of a narrative for businesses to go back to the office, albeit
Yeah.
potentially in a hybrid way. And I know we can break that down shortly. But I wanted to just off the bat, I just wanted to get what are your biggest criticisms of hybrid or remote working? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People talk about loneliness and talk about mental health. I mean, when you're stuck in a room on your own all day,
Yeah.
every day, it's not great for your mental health, is it? If I was to put you on the spot, what would your biggest criticisms of total remote working be?
I think a couple of things. I think from a company perspective, particularly if you're trying to do something different and grow, not having people together, personally, I think slows things down. It's very, very hard to bring people together around a goal. When things change, you have to be so on point with your communication to make sure people really understand why things are changing, that it's just a really slow process. And I think if you've got people in a room together and they're feeling it and they can see why the changes are needed,
Sure.
it's just much easier to move fast and move forward with that. Actually, at JustPart, for a while we had a remote team, a remote dev team, but we were so early in our product that it just didn't really work because the product changes were so slow and they weren't really that well understood because people weren't together and they weren't seeing and hearing what customers say, and they weren't feeling the problems in the business that were being solved by technology.
Yeah.
So that's the first one, is if you're trying to grow a business and you're trying to do it quickly, I think it will be much harder to do that if you're fully remote.
Yes.
Unless it's some of the best examples of remote work were driven by open source technology, which I think is a very specific benefit of remote work. Is open source technology can develop really, really fast because you've got access to all of these developers worldwide, but most businesses don't suit that, and that's my view.
Yes,
I think from an
understand.
individual perspective, for me, everything you've said is true. Loneliness and mental health, all of that is true, but I think there's like a personal development piece, which is, I think, completely lost when you're fully remote. If you want to grow and develop quickly as a person in business
Yeah.
or in your career, being at home, I really think stunts your growth.
Yeah, I completely agree. In some positions more than others, in some lines of work more than others. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. It's definitely shades of grey, but I think as a rule, if you're ambitious and you want to develop quickly,
Yeah.
being around an environment with people more senior than you or different teams, it just gives you development that you just cannot get if you're remote. I think
100%.
the other thing that being remote does is creates quite a transactional relationship between person and employer, and I think that can actually tend to quite a negative relationship. And I know there's lots of discussion around how to maintain well-being and culture in a remote setting, but I think by its very nature, it does default to a transactional relationship, a clock in, clock out kind of thing, because you're not seeing people, you're not there, you're seeing people through a video, and it's just,
I completely agree,
much harder to develop relationships.
It's amazing how structured and scheduled our lives have become in the remote working world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, for example, do you know, like when you're in uni, you always say the best nights out are the ones that are off the cuff. You know what I mean? You didn't
totally.
plan. But
Totally.
I'm looking back at my career, and the best lessons I learned were always the ones that happened through serendipity or spontaneity, or just didn't, unforeseen circumstances, how you react to things. And you kind of cancel a lot of that, don't you?
It's when you're maybe a little bit more junior than you should be, but you get invited to the meeting because you happen to be there. It's those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It's having lunch with someone really senior because you're all sitting in the kitchen together. And it's like those kinds of things, however hard a company tries, just cannot be replicated remotely.
No, it's impossible. Yeah.
It's impossible. And I think what happened in COVID, and I think it's still happening to some extent, but it's changing, is you've got the people who are more developed in their career, who were really, really happy with the remote setup because they'd got a lot of that value out already. And for them, it meant, they might have a family, they have better work-life balance, they might live a bit further out, commutes a bit longer. But it was, in my view, at least, it was at the detriment of those younger people who would not then have the opportunities that they had when they were in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, sure.
But I think that's all balancing out now.
Well, hopefully,
Hope so.
I think there will be a generation of workers who are going to be disadvantaged from this gap, because I don't think we've quite conquered it yet. I think we will get better at it.
Yeah.
get better at replacing the serendipity and the water cooler effect and stuff like that. But I don't think we're quite there yet, are we? But yes, it's a really interesting topic. So what is the role of the modern workplace, do you think then, Lucy?
I think it probably goes back to the question on leadership, actually. For me, it's all about bringing people together to create better outcomes. And I think our firm belief, I mean, clearly we're in the business, we're biased, our firm belief that the in-person interactions that you can create in a business environment lead to better outcomes than remote. That's not to say every piece of work and every interaction needs to be in person, but I think there is unique value and unique types of interactions that you cannot do remotely and you have to do
Yeah,
in
sure.
person. That's both the serendipity, the kind of spontaneous moments that you've mentioned, but also more planned stuff. You know, I don't know if you've ever used digital whiteboarding tools, but for me, that experience is completely substandard relative to getting in a room together and
Oh,
brainstorming
yes,
something. It's not,
absolutely.
not even close. And I think, you know, when you're trying to drive real innovation and real creativity, the remote environment for me hasn't got close to replicating the magic there. And I think that is what the future of the workplace needs to be. It needs to be intentful. It needs to enable those moments, all of those things that you cannot do at home. It needs to create an environment that they are really enhanced so that basically people can come in and get the benefits of being in, you know, be in a creative environment, learn from others, develop as people, create connections with people, create connections with the company. And I
Sure.
think companies of all sizes are still, as you said, they're all still very much on their journey with this. And I think our business, we're trying to provide real leadership for companies on how they can do this. But we've got, you know, 60, 70 companies that we work with across London, and can tell you very few of them have figured it out. So as a big journey to go on.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to get your forecast on that actually. Like maybe we just reach down and get the crystal ball out, and how is this going to play out, Lucy? Do you think we're going to fall into a 2-3 day split? How is this going to play out in a standardized manner? Do you know what I mean? What other things?
Yeah,
How is it going to look in say 5 years?
I think 2-3 seems to be the running theme at the moment. My personal view is I think that will edge up a little bit. I don't think we'll ever end up at 5 days, but I think
No.
what we've found from some of the companies we work with is that, you know, it's really easy to forget about the benefits of being in person when you don't have to commute and you're sitting in a comfortable environment at home all day. But
Yeah.
once you do commute and you're in with all the people that you like and you're meeting new people, like, people remember that it's actually quite fun and you get quite a lot out of it. So I think once that starts happening more and more, which it already is, I think that then creates, oh, actually, maybe I'll go in tomorrow. Maybe I'll go in a bit more than I had planned. And also, business leaders, I think now are starting to really understand the benefits more and create more structure around it. I mean, in our view, structure is so important, and you have to, I believe, as someone running a business, be able to say to people, this is what we expect of you and this is what we're going to give you on those days that you are coming into the office.
The worst thing is when people go into an office and still use Zoom to go on a
Yeah,
meeting with someone who's two minutes down the corridor, and I've seen that happen. And it's just
that's
like,
also
what are you
true.
doing?
That's also true. Yeah, but I think it's like it is a real responsibility for business leaders that I don't think they quite realized, because I think people went into this being like, oh, great, we can give people ultimate flexibility to do whatever they want. This is such a perk. We can just say you can work wherever you want. And it's like, well,
Sure.
actually, no, that's pretty unfair on your people if you're not providing clarity and leadership, because
Yes.
what if some people do want to come in and then you're creating an environment that's really substandard?
Which is very prevalent at the moment, may I
Very
add.
prevalent, and I personally think very damaging. You know, there's
Yes.
nothing that's going to make you dislike your employer more than commuting in for an hour, spending the money on the train, and then sitting in an empty office on Zoom all day. Like, that's
Sure.
not a good environment. So I think, just to go back to your question, for me, it's all about having the foresight to create clarity, structure, and really invest in those in-person experiences, because those in-person experiences, in my view, are the ones that will set you apart from your competitors and really help you grow as a business.
What skills do you look for in employees now to fit in with your hybrid work strategy? Do you know what I mean? Because it's got
Yeah.
to be different to say 2018 and when we were all in 9 to 5. I mean, I'm sure you would agree that we are looking for new skills now from leaders to get the best out of employees in this remote world.
I think for us, I mean, again, we're in the business, so very
Sure.
biased. But I think
But you must get asked to advise other companies on
we
things
do
like
all the
this.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for us actually a large part of the deciding factor, other than all the other stuff around leadership that we will be screening for, is we kind of need people to have an opinion on this.
Sure.
I think there has really been a leadership vacuum on this since the beginning of COVID. And if we're hiring for a leader in the business and they don't have an opinion on why in-person work's important and how to really create great environments for their team, then that is a massive leadership gap in my mind. So that's a really big one for us. I think it's also, we really look for people who are passionate about developing people and really, they have an opinion on how to do that, and they have an opinion on what their leadership style is in relation to people. Again, I think that is really important in the new world of hybrid, because you do have to try a lot harder. You can't just sit there and use osmosis to help the people in your
Great word.
team
Yeah.
kind of learn. You've got to be really intentful with it. And I think perhaps in the old world, leaders would kind of develop through because of the path that they're given by their company, but actually perhaps didn't really develop much leadership skills because everyone was in 5 days a week, be a bit more lazy about it potentially.
Yeah. No, completely agree. So, what advice do you give to companies who have got, a little bit of a on-site model now then? And do you encourage them to loosen up towards a hybrid model, or do you just capitalize on it?
I think it's about really understanding what it is they do and what it is they're trying to do. And I
Sure.
think what we've tried to do with our setup is make sure that our setup mirrors what our clients need. We do have some services businesses in our portfolio, and what they often ask is, well, how are my clients working? How can I work to best serve my clients? And I think that's
Sure.
a really, really important one, because if you're not set up in a way to best serve your clients, then your competitors will be, and they'll provide a better service. So that's definitely one, is understanding what they're trying to do. I think it is also understanding what they're trying, how ambitious they are. If they are really trying to grow quickly and disrupt an industry, then we would always suggest that the setup of the space is really creative. You've got places for people to sit down and work if they want to focus, but actually there's tons of different types of working environments to really enhance the collaborative and creative side of business. For us, it's like there's constantly days where we're just like, should we just go and have a little chat about that? And then it like creates a new stream of work or a new solution to a problem that we're facing. And I think having an environment where there are different types of spaces for people to congregate
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
is a big part of the puzzle. The sea of desks is no more. And we do have some companies who are in 5 days a week. Companies like recruitment firms, it's pretty challenging to be remote, because a lot of it is the camaraderie of the team
Of course, yeah.
coming together. And in that environment, we would suggest something different. But it's all about, what are you trying to achieve, and how can we create a space that best aligns with what you're trying to achieve as a business. So it does vary.
I was listening to Bruce Daisley's podcast, who's an ex-guest of the Tech Leaders podcast. It's called Eat, Sleep, Work, Repeat, which I definitely recommend. And he had a commercial real estate specialist on, and they were talking about this, evolution of the workplace post-COVID. And it was a brilliant example that he used was the Apple Store, and how the Apple Store kind of changed the retail experience to a certain
Yeah,
extent, because it
definitely.
was more about, when the Apple stores arrived, it was, most of the other shops were like sort of British Home stores. It was just you went there to
You don't
shop.
have tills, right?
Yeah, but you go into the
For a
Apple store.
start.
It's not about so much about the shopping. It's about the experience of being there. Do you know what I mean? The wide open spaces, the sort of minimalism,
100%.
and people just enjoy being there. Which I know it
Yeah, yeah.
seems like not very groundbreaking now, because everyone, but at the time it was. And I think potentially this is what's happening to offices. Offices need to be attractive places for people to want to go, to look forward
100%.
to. Wait, oh, I'm going in the office today, amazing, can't wait, you know what I mean? I'm going in there,
Yeah, yeah.
and we're going to play table tennis, or we're going to congregate and have a meeting, or we're going to get drunk in the office because it's Christmas do, or whatever it is. But it
Yeah,
needs
yeah,
to
yeah.
be that pleasant place where you feel you're going to grow and enjoy yourself. Is that what you're trying to create for your clients? Is that sort of leisure element?
That's completely it. It's more of an experience, because I think what COVID proved is that for the work that I understand today, and that I'm doing day in, day out, as long as it's not relating to kind of new stuff. I can do that at home. I can sit in front of my laptop and get through my churn. But nobody wants to stay stagnant for the rest of their lives, right? Nobody just wants to do what they've done, in the past forever. So what we need to create with workplaces is that it's an experience that makes you feel like you're moving and you're part of something bigger and you're progressing and you're around people that are ambitious that are also progressing. And it's so much more than just put the desks in and then leave. It's an ongoing experience that needs to be continually evolving. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do, because with our service, we are with clients throughout their whole experience and we're advising them on an ongoing basis. Often what we do is somebody goes into a space and then after 3 months, they're actually using it in a really different way to what they thought they were. So we sit down with them and have another design consultation about how they might want to change things. That's the big shift here. It's people used to buy an office, maybe do some kind of design and fit out and then be left to it and never change anything. And then in 5 years' time, go to the next one. That 5 years is a lifetime in a business's journey and in an evolution. And I think it is all about creating that experience that makes your business better and makes your people better. But it's not an easy task, I'll tell you that.
No, I can imagine. No, absolutely. It really isn't. And I think a lot of companies are finding that out. But let's talk about productivity very quickly. What is your number one piece of productivity advice? How do you stay optimal?
It's a great question. And I can give my advice. I don't know how good I am at doing it, but I think my advice would be it's about ruthless prioritization. I think when you're in the day to day and particularly as a founder of an early stage business, you end up doing so many different jobs because the business just needs you to do it.
Sure.
That you end up getting quite deep in detail quite a lot of the time because you're running a certain team or you're solving a certain problem. And I think when you're that deep in the detail, it's really hard to get yourself out of it and look at the priorities in a more high level way. And so I think creating the space to make sure you are reviewing priorities at a high level and make sure you haven't kind of veered off down a path accidentally is super important. And then that's why I'm really thankful to have a co-founder, right? Because you can sort of help get yourself out of the detail and reflect on the longer term goals. So I'd say that reviewing priorities regularly and giving yourself the headspace to do that rather than assuming you can do that while you're also in the detail.
Yes, it's such a trap, though, isn't it? Getting stuck into the detail. Oh God, I've caught myself again.
Yeah, there's actually a phrase for it, which is altitude sickness, where you're kind of diving in and diving out and diving in and diving out.
I love that.
It's impossible to do, and it's all about you almost have to totally detach yourself from the detail in order to think at the high level. And I think businesses that are more developed than ours, you have proper leadership teams in place, and we have lots of leaders in the business, and we're getting to that stage, but we're not quite there yet. So there's still some altitude sickness that carries me day to day.
So what about in terms of like breaking away and giving yourself a break then? What do you do outside of work? What do you do to give yourself some downtime?
I'd actually say one of the things I've always been quite good at is compartmentalizing my mind so that things don't bleed into each other. So I think I've always been quite lucky in that sense. I don't know what it is about the way my brain is made up. But
that's a superpower. That is, you should be lucky with that.
I do think so. It's meant that there's been things that have happened personally that I've been able to kind of just like crack on with my work without letting things bleed in. So I think that helps. But then I don't have a great answer for this. I think I really prioritize family. Live really close to pretty much all my family, extended and direct, and spend a lot of time with them at the weekends. Do like to kind of read and listen to podcasts and switch off in that sense, but I wouldn't say I'm not the most inspirational in terms of running marathons or anything like that, I'm
afraid. Looking back now then, and I know you're still very early on in your career, Lucy, but what advice, if you were to sort of give yourself some career advice, your 21-year-old self, what would you say to that person?
I think for me, it is all about confidence. I think I, as a 21-year-old, didn't have that much confidence in my own abilities. And I think what I learned relatively quickly is most people are completely blagging it all the time.
Sure.
And as long as you're not afraid of what people think or afraid of failing, then it doesn't matter what the answer is, you'll learn from it and you'll grow. And I think that's what you don't get taught at school. Failure is okay. And actually, failure is actually the quickest way to learn. And as soon as you realize that everyone's making it up on the spot anyway, and actually your answer can't be that bad, you kind of give it a go. And I think the development, once you've got over that hurdle, the development that you have as an individual is just like so fast, because you're like, okay, that didn't work, on to the next one, But you need to have the
Absolutely.
confidence to be able to do that in the first place.
Yeah, that is the one thing that I think the Americans seem to have over us Brits, don't they? Is that a failed startup seems like to be like a badge of honor in some in
100%,
Silicon
yeah.
Valley or whatever, you know. Whereas in Britain,
Yeah,
it's like we
totally.
have this enormous fear of failure, which holds so many people back.
I do think it's the education system to some extent, because if you
Yes.
fail an exam, it's like the worst thing in the world, and you know, you can't progress to the next stage. And I get it, it's education, so you need structure, but it's just the complete wrong message, I think, for anyone wanting to do anything a bit different in their career.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know you love a book. What books or maybe other pieces of content have you been inspired by recently, Lucy?
It's a really good question. I think I'm quite boring in that I like reading non-fiction books. So yeah, my husband's the one who loves fiction. One book I really enjoyed actually, which is a proper kind of business book. It's a series by Patrick Lencioni, but specifically it's a book called Five Dysfunctions of a Team. And what it is
Oh, I've
do you
heard
know the
about
one?
this. Yeah, I've not read it, but I've heard of it.
It's basically like a fictional leadership team who all have different personality types, and it sort of talks about the interactions they have with each other in a way that really helps you understand how different people work and how different people tick. And it's just
Right.
written,
Okay.
and it's a really quick read. It's written in such a way that I think really helps you develop your communication style and the way you work with others. So I'd really recommend that one. Some podcasts I like, I mean, nothing revolutionary here really. There's one called 20 VC, which is really helpful for anyone trying to grow a business at a very early stage. They have lots of startup type people there who are very impressive, who are
Okay.
advising on quite specific. And then I think he does do a podcast, but there's one particular person who's sort of done a bunch of writing and podcasts, a guy called Naval Ravikant, who's,
Oh, I
you know
love
him.
Naval.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
just,
he's kind of like a modern day stoic philosopher, isn't he?
but he's like a business philosopher. You know what I mean? It's like, and I found him and I dived into like a bunch of stuff he's written and said, and I think there's tons of podcasts he's been on. I'd really
Yeah, the
recommend
Tim
them as well.
Ferriss podcast, he's been on a few times and he's great on that. I think he's been on Joe Rogan as well,
He
but
has been on Joe Rogan,
he's
yeah.
done the rounds. Yeah, I completely second that.
I just found his take really interesting, that
Yeah.
it was like, it's quite different, I think, to the traditional Silicon Valley types, I'd say.
Yeah, one of our employees actually knows his brother, Kamal Ravikant, which is
Oh,
a bit of
stop it.
a lame to fame,
So
but it is.
jealous.
But apparently he's equally as impressive and
I'm
equally as
sure.
eccentric as well. But look, Lucy, I've really enjoyed chatting to you. Where can people find you and find Kitt and find about all the amazing stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, which is kitoffices.com. Personally, I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'm on Twitter, but I'm more of a reader than a tweeter, which is maybe a goal for 2023. And yeah, on our blog, we have lots of content about hybrid working and how to make it work. So definitely have a look on that.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
I love that. Lucy was great. Such an insightful conversation, and we could have talked about so much more as well. But what really stood out for me was this notion that the workplace really is something that needs to be talked about as an exciting place to go. So something that best represents the brand values of the organization. If your workplace is like a cathedral that people really want to go to, then what a huge asset that would be in terms of, engagement and so on and so forth. I think that's what more forward thinking companies are striving for. There's so much to unpack, but the other thing that I wanted to draw attention to as well, I also love Lucy's definition of what good leadership is and how that coincides with what the role of the workplace is. I'll read the quote, which is bringing people together to create desired outcomes. What a line. I'm going to use that myself. And also the perfect way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for downloading this episode. We really love doing this show and are absolutely humbled by all of the incredible people who download and listen, plus the incredible guests who take the time to come on and share their secrets and experiences with our listeners. Please can I ask that you take a couple of seconds to subscribe or follow the show. This small action means a lot to us and helps us greatly. Thank you. As you quite possibly have heard me mentioning in the past, we record the mass majority of our episodes at an amazing studio facility here in Cardiff at Tramshed Tech. Tramshed Tech is a collaborative community of entrepreneurs and scaling businesses geared towards supporting growth in tech, digital and creative industries across an ever-increasing collection of locations and partner locations, UK-wide and internationally. It really is the perfect place for your business to start up, scale up, accelerate or innovate. Head over to tramshedtech.co.uk or just search Tramshed Tech on your favourite social media platform.